Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. And this time I wish to start this video by a quote from Albert Einstein, which goes something like this: "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind a faithful servant. Yet we have crafted a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." And I could not agree more with these lines, with the very thought. Because we unfortunately have been really taught and programmed to live our life through our rational brain, which is primarily the left hemisphere of the brain. So, yes, this hemisphere, this part of the brain is very rational, it's very logical, and it is that part of the brain that will help us from, getting to point B from point A. But we also need to understand that this is also a part of the brain that will find shortcuts to reach point B from point A. It is also the part of the brain that will manipulate things to suit its convenience. And it is also the part of the brain, since it works on finding shortcuts, it is also the part of the brain that will try and numb down and dim down a bigger aspect of who we are. And unfortunately, we have not been trained and we have not been taught to use as much the right hemisphere of the brain and our hearts. So, the right hemisphere of the brain is very creative. The right hemisphere of the brain is also the aspect of the brain that feels compassion, that feels empathy, that that sees the wholesomeness of the things and not the holes in the things. So it is also that aspect of the brain which sees the bigger picture when it's trying to make a portrait using the pixels to form that picture. So, so if you think of the picture as such, the left hemisphere of the brain will either look at the picture or the painting as such without looking at the pixels. The right hemisphere of the brain will look into the pixels while trying to decipher the picture, because the picture will never be complete without the pixels. So it sees the wholesomeness of things. It is also that part of the brain that is creatively driven. And if we've heard Brené Brown talk or a lot of other researchers talk, we'll understand that creativity of any kind, uh, creating something new, innovation, is another form of creativity. And that requires us to be vulnerable. Because unless we are vulnerable, unless we are willing to shed our inhibitions, we can never tap into that creative aspect of ours. We can never tap into being flawed and being okay with it, because the rational part of the brain will try to fix it because it doesn't like the idea of being flawed. But the right hemisphere of the brain is okay with us being work in progress, which is to say that we are not perfect at this point in time. But we are work in progress, and that is absolutely okay. So we are not taught to amalgamate, to bring together these two hemispheres of the brain. Most of our lives, we are only running our lives from one side of the brain, which is a very small aspect of our being. And we also need to understand, since we run our lives on rationalizing things, we lose out, a lot of times we lose out on the emotional intelligence, on the emotional intellect. And again, nobody talks about these things, nobody teaches us about the emotional intelligence of ourselves, of of our being. Nobody teaches us about these things. So So the idea is that we need to understand this quotation for for the very simple reason, because we need to understand that all our lives we are dealing with relationships in some form or the other. So right from the time we are born, we are born into a family wherein we have parents, wherein we have the extended family, wherein we have our siblings, and once we start moving out into the bigger world, there are other relationships that we form, which are our friends, our colleagues, our classmates, our teachers, our vendors, our house helps. We even have relationships with our plants. If we do not nurture and nourish our plants, they wither out. We even have relationships with our pets. They understand when we are upset, when we are in a low phase, or when we are feeling extremely good about ourselves. They do understand our emotions. So we have relationships with them. We even have relationships with our bricks and mortar, which build up our houses. And hopefully someday we'll be able to convert those houses into homes, because as far as I understand, home is not an address. Home is a feeling, and a house is an address. And people can have numerous houses, but unless they have a home, a feeling where they feel belonged, where they truly feel connected, they will never be connected to their own selves. So when we have relationships with everything around us, how are we not taught emotional intelligence? How come nobody talks about these things? And is it not important? Is it not important to understand, to communicate, to, to call upon the learning of these very aspects that are there throughout our lifetime, right from the time we are conceived to the time we no longer exist on this planet? Is it not essential to understand that aspect of ourselves? And probably, since we do not address this, since nobody teaches us, and since we do not talk about it, we do not communicate about it, there are so many people who feel disconnected. So many billions of us inhabiting this planet, and yet so many feel disconnected. Yet so many commit suicide. Yet so many feel that people don't understand, that their parents don't understand them, that their own spouses don't understand them, that their own colleagues don't understand them. I also feel that we don't even understand our own selves, because we don't talk about it, because we don't talk about the emotional intelligence, the emotional intellect. We talk about the rationalization of everything, rationalizing everything. We don't talk about emotionalizing things. And half of our lives, more than half of our lives, we run on emotions, energy in motion, and yet we don't address it. Probably that is why so many psychiatrists, so many therapists, so many healers, so many counselors are flourishing. And I'm not disregarding them. They are needed. They are much needed, because of so many of us are feeling disconnected, because if so many of us are not able to deal with our emotions, if so many of us have been used, have been programmed to numbing down our emotions, it's not surprising that we don't understand them. We have learnt the process to anesthetize our emotions, and probably that is why we feel so disconnected despite billions around us. So let's try and work towards developing emotional intelligence, emotional intellect. Because unless we do that, it's very difficult to feel belonged, not only in a group, but also within our own selves. Let's try and do more of that, and I will see you once again next week. Till then, stay connected.